Childhood is a curious thing. It's such an innocent time in our lives when the world is so full of wonder and excitement. Even the most mundane things that we take for granted in adulthood are instead made out to be amazing and mind-blowing. But there's a darker side to this as well, one that's just as easily scared as it is impressed. And, having personally grown up in a heavily sheltered environment, this made me especially vulnerable to those inevitable traumatic experiences that so many other YouTubers have talked at length about. Now I figured, since this is such an interesting topic of discussion, why wait until Halloween to give it a try? Keep YouTube creepy, everyone! So with that being said, allow me to throw my hat into the ring as I discuss my personal childhood traumas, many of which have even stayed with me to this day. Starting with... Far as I can tell, this was my earliest traumatic memory. And boy, what a way to start out. I remember it vividly. I was living in Columbus at the time. We just rented a few videos from the library. One of these was a National Geographic double feature called Dinosaurs and Other Creature Features. Naturally, being the kid that I was mainly in it for the dinosaurs. But when it came time to watch the other half of this bad boy, I had no idea what I was in for. Especially when it came time to... enjoy the music video that was attached to this particular episode.
Creepy creatures, like in the movies I see. Creepy creatures, but they're not on TV. They're right next to you. They're right next to me, and I like them. They're as real as can be.
Right off the bat, the entirety of this video is done in the stop motion style. Therefore, everything's got this very jerky, almost uncanny motion to it. I don't know, maybe it's just the puppets being used here. I mean, seriously, get a look at these fucking things, will ya? But I always found them unsettling, even as a child. Coupled with a pretty menacing pipe organ cue to get the song rolling, as well as the visible fright from the main character as he approaches the TV, it effectively sets the dark and spooky tone for the rest of the video, which was what they were going for. But what really scared me as a kid were the video clips they played of old horror movies. I recognize some of them now, such as The Night of the Living Dead, which I did eventually see in college, but back then, I'd never seen anything like it. I was especially afraid of this freaky thing. What on earth is that supposed to be? It wasn't until James Rolfe gave us Monster Madness 9 that I learned it came from an old 50s movie called House on Haunted Hill. And as soon as the video ended, and the room was plunged into dead silence with the TV off, all I could think about was that mangled hand peeking through the doorway. Poor little kid me was so scared that I started crying then and there until Mom showed up. If that ain't trauma, I don't know what is. It wasn't long after watching Dinos and Other Creature Features that I was introduced to the Amazing Animals series, or as me and my brother had so affectionately dubbed them, Henry videos, because it was hosted by a lizard named Henry. I don't know what possessed me to rent the Scary Animals video. Once just wasn't enough, I guess. Thankfully though, this production was utterly devoid of the problems which plagued the last entry on this list. Even the animation, while fairly cheap, was still appealing in that VeggieTales sort of way, where the art style makes the characters believable despite such a low budget. However, there was one scene from this video that I will never forget, and anyone who was unfortunate enough to see this thing as a child will know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay, so what's that then?
It's okay. It's only your reflection, Henry.
Oh, that's a relief.
Huh?
Creatures of the night.
Ah! Henry! Henry!
What?
Your reflection, it...
Now who's getting spooked?
Nuff said. One of my all-time favorite TV shows from the 90s will always and forever be Wishbone. If I could hold one factor of my childhood responsible for my love of literature, it'd have to be this one. This show introduced me to a ton of classics, such as A Tale of Two Roses, Faust, Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, and in this particular episode, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. And as usual, it did not disappoint. Everything about this Halloween special was so spot on, I even distinctly remember seeing a newspaper article about it. My little mind was blown. And even to this day, my sister and I watch this every year in October. So with that being said, this entry really hasn't had the lasting impression that the others did. But make no mistake, when I first saw this on television, it took the cake for the single scariest thing I'd ever seen on PBS. And even as an adult, I still find this scene to be masterfully crafted and genuinely chilling. See for yourself.
What are you talking about?
It happened a long time ago. The first Halloween that my mom let me go trick-or-treating without her. David and I went all over the neighborhood that night. Some kids talked about going to Thunder Road.
I was the one who wanted to go.
What happened?
It was windy that night, too. But there was lightning. It didn't seem that bad from the street, so I walked toward the house. The closer I got, the worse it looked. And the noises, I didn't think I could do it. I reached out to grab the doorknob, and
Is it over?
Oh, you said it, little buddy. Even revisiting it today, the fact that you see nothing but the entity's eyes still scares me. And as a kid, the sound that it made was what got to me the most because I couldn't identify it. As an adult, though, I can now clearly tell what it is. Specifically, it's the sound of a cat growling, just with the pitch turned down with a reverb effect. I even replicated it for this video, turning this into this. And upon subsequent viewings of this episode, I've since put two and two together and realized the house is being haunted by black cat spirits. But nothing will ever compare to the stark terror I felt when I first saw those eyes so many years ago, which still creep me out today. Ah, yes, this movie. Possibly the most infamous entry in the long line of direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movies, Zombie Island was intended from the very beginning to rejuvenate the franchise and make it a household name again. And it really shows. With a darker color palette, more ominous tone, and higher stakes, this film definitely did just that. But most important of all, it gave Scooby-Doo something that it never quite achieved during its run on TV. And that is horror.
It's deja vu all over again, and we know what to do, eh, Scoob? Well, run! Yikes! It's a regular zombie jamboree!
And I suppose they're all animatronic, too!
Well, it is a possibility, Daff.
You're not a skeptic, Fred. You're in denial.
Fun fact about me. I am terrified of zombies. Everything from their physical appearance and hunger for human flesh to their sheer numbers. And it's this movie which is directly responsible for that. These ain't the goofy cartoon zombies from the original TV show either. These things are so well drawn and so intimidating, they honestly would not be out of place in HBO's Spawn cartoon, an adult production. I personally don't know how they managed to crank this one out without driving the censors crazy, especially with scenes like Fred decapitating a zombie on screen, but Hanna-Barbera definitely succeeded in bringing life back to this series. Many more animated films would follow, but none would ever top Zombie Island. It didn't push the envelope, it shoved that sucker off the friggin' table and into a smoldering pit of eternal fire. Just coincidentally exactly where the film came from. I do recommend it, but only to the bravest of souls. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the big one. Yep, I saved the best for last. It's been well over 10 years since I saw this video, and I still can't bear to watch it. In spite of every last bit of disturbing media that I've ever seen, this one still gets to me just as much now as it did when I first watched it. You have to understand, compared to this, I'll blast creepy creatures while driving late at night in the country road. I will sit through Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island in a bayou cemetery at midnight. I'll watch Pennywise rip Georgie's arm off on repeat before ever revisiting this video. Because this one piece of media did something that no other entry on this list ever could. It appealed to a religious fear that I still haven't gotten rid of. And I still can't believe it was shown so casually to my fellow youth group members, who I can only imagine were just as freaked out as I was. So, dear viewer, know that it took a degree of actual courage to revisit this thing. This is it. The most disturbing bit of media that I saw as a kid. We ready? We set? Good. Let's go. For those of you who don't know, Carmen, this guy, is a prominent Christian musician whose popularity reached its peak in the 80s and 90s. And, to his credit, his stuff wasn't half bad, albeit mildly so from the paranoia of the Satanic Panic, with lines like these.
Dungeons and Dragons games set on the table.
Jeez, that sounds so dated now. But anyway, the particular video I was shown in a youth group on that fateful day was called The Witch's Invitation. Supposedly, it was a retelling of a real-life experience that Carmen's pastor had, but don't quote me on that. The basic story here is that Carmen's contacted by a self-proclaimed warlock named Isaac, who challenges him to a battle of faith. Pretty standard stuff, really. That is, until Carmen decides that he's had enough of Isaac's ego and lays the sacred smackdown on the state of his eternal soul. And it's disturbing. Okay, here we go. We're about to revisit this bastard. Keep in mind, I was a young and sheltered Christian kid at the time. What you're about to see basically defined my worst nightmare. And in fact, it still does. Let's roll.
The time will come when you'll be lying in bed, wheezing like a dying animal, when those spirits lay claim to the rights they own to your soul. Then the room will grow dark, and the most hideous evil faces you've ever seen will come flaming out of the floor with a yell. The vile informants that promised reincarnation will claw your spirit and victoriously drag your soul to hell.
So, no joke, guys. While I was revisiting this footage for the video, my heart actually started racing. Like I said earlier, it scares me just as much now as it did back then. It's the most hopeless situation imaginable. Lying defenseless in what's supposed to be the safest room in your house, having that space invaded by an evil force that you can't drive away, and being dragged into eternal damnation as they hover victoriously over your bed? Truly, this was by far the most disturbing piece of media I ever saw as an impressionable kid. Mind you, I'm still every bit the Christian I was back then, but I'm still scared. That's how childhood fear works. And until I cross over into paradise, I'll always be scared. So that's basically it. I might have missed one or two things, but those are generally the shows and videos which traumatized me as a kid. Can you recall any specific examples from your childhood? What movies or TV shows left you disturbed when you were little? Let me know in the comments section below. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I encourage you all to have a great rest of your day. As for me, I'm gonna go see if I can get all this crap out of my mind. This was not easy. Till next time, everybody.